Today we're going to go over all of the exotic weapons and where they fall in the current meta. For this video I will be summing in my inner clickbaity YouTuber thing, and there will be a tier list at the end. However, I'm going to do it in two different ways. I'm going to do one tier list as if only the exotic weapons exist. How would they compete against each other with their absolute best build that you could put on them? And then I'm going to actually come back to reality and realise that there are other weapons and then stack them up against the actual current meta that we have for each one. This will hopefully give you a rough idea of 1, how these weapons perform, 2, how to best build around them, and 3, as to whether or not they're even worth it in the first place. Now, I will be going over individually each of the weapons beforehand, whether or not their talent is very good, what actually makes them so powerful. In the case of St. Elmo's, talent is shit, attachments god tier, things like that. Anyway, let's kick this off. They are going to be in no particular order, it's just going to be on the order of the spreadsheet that I have up, and I'm just going to read down. So first up is Chameleon. Chameleon is an exotic AR. It comes from the Chris Vector family. Its talent is Adaptive Instincts. Hitting 30 headshots grants 20% critical hit chance and 50% critical hit damage for 45 seconds. Hitting 75 body shots will give you 90% weapon damage for 45 seconds, and hitting 30 leg shots grants 150% reload speed for 45 seconds. Exiting combat refreshes the timer on all active buffs. Secondary attribute is 9.5 critical hit chance, optic is 15% critical hit chance, magazine plus 20 rounds, muzzle is plus 20 accuracy, and underbarrel is plus 10 stability. Now sadly we're not going to be ranking these weapons on how sexy they are. If we were, Chameleon would certainly be taking the first 20 spots. Alas, we have to look at what the actual weapon is capable of in 2 scenarios. 1 is absolute maximum performance, and 2 where it sits in the current meta. In terms of its absolute maximum performance, assuming you're able to somehow magically keep all 3 buffs active at the same time, this is the most powerful AR in the game. Sadly, that is not going to happen. 1, it takes an awful lot of effort to get those buffs up and running. 2, they don't actually last for that long, and in the majority of scenarios, 45 seconds is not long enough to actually warrant the use of this weapon generally. The accuracy and stability of this weapon is absolute hot shit. I cannot believe the amount of people that keep trying to tell me that this weapon is a laser. I don't think you understand what a laser is. A laser is completely straight and fires continuously. Vector 1 has to reload, so there goes that problem. 2, honestly, you struggle to hit anything beyond the White House at 20 meters. It's absolutely horrible in terms of overall performance with its accuracy. The stability is very nice, however, we do have to remember that it is an SMG at heart. Nothing will change that. It might have the AR reticule, it might say AR, it might even have the AR attribute line of damage to health, but it is still an SMG, and its accuracy definitely shows this. In terms of comparing it with the meta, again, it really does just come down to its talent. Are you able to get those stacks up? There are certain instances, such as utilising it with a striker's build, where this weapon does perform absolutely beautifully, and when you are able to get the talent up, it will absolutely one-man army shred legendary with ease, but you got to do it in 45 seconds. Good luck. Up next we have Eagle Bearer, the exotic AR P416. Eagle Strike. Accuracy increases as you continuously fire up to 30%. Headshots will grant the tenacity buff for 15 seconds. The damage reduction of tenacity is increased by 1% on body shots, 5% for headshots. The default damage reduction is 40%. Tenacity. 40 to 80% of the damage you take is delayed until the buff expires, depending on the amount of shots above. All of the total delayed damage is reduced for each enemy killed while the buff is active, up to 100% for 3 kills. Secondary attribute is headshot damage, optics is 10% crit chance, magazine is plus 30 rounds, muzzle is plus 15 crit damage, and underbarrel is plus 10% weapon handling. Oh, how the mighty have fallen. First of all, my big complaint with this is the overall talent itself. 1. Eagle Strike. Accuracy increases as you continuously fire. Yeah, by fuck all. It feels absolutely terrible, and for a weapon that's entire talent is based around headshots, the accuracy is really what hurts it here. Even if you can get up to a 30% boost in your accuracy, it really doesn't feel like it doesn't show, and when you do proc tenacity, unless you're able to continually press the enemy to get those kills to mitigate it, tenacity itself will actually kill you. This weapon has gone from being the best AR in the game mathematically to being the worst AR in the game mathematically. In terms of overall performance though, the best thing about it is the 60 round magazine. It does look pretty cool, it does feel pretty nice on your striker's build, however the overall performance will be lackluster. The only real time this weapon actively shines is going to be in PvP, simply just because it turns you into an absolute monster. In terms of meta, again, this is going to be a PvE versus PvP scenario. In PvE, this weapon is seldom used, seldom should be used, and most likely is just going to make for a pretty exotic component. If you're a PvP player, this weapon is near enough a complete must-have, simply just because of the talent. Everyone's favourite new toy, St. Elmo, the Levia C exotic AR. Actum Est, shooting an enemy will give 1 stack. At 100 stack, the next magazine is filled with shock ammo. You cannot gain stacks while you have shock ammo. Its secondary attribute is random and rerollable, optics is 20% crit damage, magazine plus 30 rounds, muzzle plus 20% critical hit chance, and the underbarrel is plus 20% weapon handling. This has become an instant favourite for veteran and new players alike. It really does show. It has pretty good base stats, despite the fact that it is a Levia C. It has the base stats of a Police M4, one of the more popular ARs in the game. This build will slot basically into any gear set perfectly. It does struggle with brand sets and will typically fall short due to the attachments being so large. Might sound like a bit of a misnomer, but due to those attachments being so large, it is very hard to build around effectively and easily, and you will typically find that at that point, on brand sets, yellow builds, high-end builds, however you want to look at them, this weapon will actually fall short, and you will tend to be better off utilising near enough any other AR, as it does actually outperform them. On gear sets though, this has become a bit of a shake-up, allowing True Patriot to hold its own among the best in-slot crowd, as well as also allowing a lot of gear set builds to push just that little bit further up without having to utilise perfect focus. Sadly, this does also mean that a lot of the top end best in slot or meta builds will still be utilizing FAMAS with focus, simply just because it will do so much more than what St. Elmo's is capable of. Even a lot of gear set builds that do not utilize perfect focus will still perform better with a FAMAS. Quite simply, this weapon has not changed the meta whatsoever, or the best in slot, unless we look just specifically at True Patriot. This weapon does still perform very well though. It is a very, very good AR, and it is incredibly balanced. Maybe not for PvP, but for PvE it is probably one of the most balanced ARs in the game that we currently have. Bighorn, an exotic AUG A3. Utilising the scope swaps this weapon from being an automatic fire to a semi-automatic fire. In semi-automatic fire mode, it will deal 450% weapon damage with each shot. Headshots grant 2% headshot damage and stacks up to 50 times. Once fully stacked, 10 stacks decay every 4 seconds until the stacks have been removed. Headshot decay is delayed by hitting the head. Secondary attribute is 10% critical hit damage, optic is 30% headshot, magazine 10% reload speed, accuracy is on the muzzle, and underbarrel is 10% stability. This weapon is another victim of relies on headshots, but is about as accurate as watching CNN. The overall performance of this weapon, if you have some form of god tier aim, does actually put it into the second highest DPS of any AR in the game. The problem is being able to 1. Get the buff, 2. Maintain the buff, and 3. Utilize it to its full capacity is going to be near impossible. Lana Rhodes might be absolutely stunning, but if she's got the personality of a wet goldfish, the most you're really going to do is try and put her on a blind date with Chris Brown. This weapon is basically the exact same. On paper, it reads absolutely beautiful. In practice, it's hot garbage. Capacitor, the weapon that shook up the skill build, best in slot. It's an exotic PDR. Shooting enemies builds stacks of up to a cap of 40. Each stack grants 1.5% skill damage. After 5 seconds, these stacks will decay at 1 stack per second. For each skill tier, you gain 7.5% weapon damage. Main attribute is 12% armor, as opposed to the 21% health damage we all know and love, and the secondary attribute is the 9.5 health damage. Optic is 10% crit chance, magazine is 11 rounds, muzzle is 30% critical hit damage, and the underbarrel is 10% weapon handling. This weapon did actually shake up a fair few builds. Not did it only just boost the credibility of hybrid builds, allowing for things such as the bro build, it also allows for skill builds to actually get more involved. Take the hint, skill build players, get more involved. It is also one of the highest DPS ARs if you just put it on a DPS build. Not only does it have 12% native damage to armor, the attachments of 10% crit chance and 30% critical hit damage actually do go a very long way. It is only really best in slot on skill or hybrid builds because of the 7.5% weapon damage gained from skill tiers. However, it does also perform very well under basically any circumstance. Now we have Bullet King, which is an exotic Negev. This weapon never needs to reload. For every 100 bullets that hit the enemy, replenish 1 magazine worth of ammo to you and all your allies' ammo reserve. For Bullet King, this replenishes 100 bullets since the mag is hidden. The attachments and attributes are 10% critical hit damage for its secondary attribute. The magazine, there is none. Muzzle is 5% critical hit chance, and the underbarrel is 10% stability. The first problem is this weapon is the same problem that all LMGs have, and that is just the simple fact of they are LMGs. The next problem Bullet King has is that of the bad class of LMGs, Bullet King is quite literally just the worst. Not only does it have absolutely terrible and minimal attachments, the talent is nonsensical and has no bearing on the weapon itself. The only thing this thing actually has going for it is its rate of fire. Just to put this into a little bit of perspective, if we were just to change that secondary attribute from 10% critical hit damage to damage to targets out of cover, Bullet King would jump from being the worst mathematically shown LMG in the game to being the 3rd best LMG in the game. That is how in desperate need this weapon is of a rework. Continuing the trend of bad LMGs, we have Blue Screen, an exotic stoner. It has disrupt around shooting an enemy, marks them and adds a stack to the agent to a count of 50. Shooting marked enemies refreshes the mark and adds stacks to the agent. When you deploy a non-shield skill, remove all stacks of the agent to the marked target and trigger the effect. 1 to 10 stacks is pulsed for 5 seconds, 11 to 25 is pulse and disrupt, and then 26 to 49 is pulse, disrupt, disorient, and then 50 stacks we get pulse, disrupt, disorient all hostiles, as well as all hostiles within 10 meters of the marked target. This effect will trigger immediately if any marked enemies are killed. Secondary attribute is 6% damage to armor. Why is it not rate of fire? Optics is 10% reload speed. Magazine is 15% weapon handling. Muzzle is 10% rate of fire, and underbarrel is 10% stability. Now, in terms of performance, Blue Screen is technically the best LMG, or well, exotic LMG, simply just because it allows you to do damage, CC, as well as provide minimal buffs to your team through use of pulse, as long as they're running flatline or spotter. In terms of just overall base damage and performance, Blue Screen is the highest DPS LMG. It just starts to lack a little bit once you start putting builds on it because its attachments are not damage based and more for accuracy, stability, just utility effects. Blue Screen does perform well within the meta or best in slot, but only really as a supporting class of weapons. However, the overall performance of this weapon is nothing to be understated. Rounding off our trio of why do these weapons exist is going to be Pestilence, which is an exotic M249. Plague of the Outcasts, hits apply a debuff, not a status effect, a debuff, dealing 100% damage over 10 seconds. This stacks up to 50 times. Whenever an enemy dies, the debuff, all stacks are transferred to nearby enemies within 25 meters. Secondary attribute is damage to armor, magazine is 10% fire rate, muzzle is 10% accuracy, and underbarrel is 10% stability. This is a favorite among LMG users. The only issue with it is again, it is an LMG. From a technical standpoint, Pestilence is not a best in slot weapon, it is not a meta weapon, it is a very, very fun weapon. Adding in the fact that it allows you to damage enemies without actually damaging them, it does pair nicely into some team compositions, especially if you do need to actually suppress something by use of Pestilence and still damage them just in case it's needed. Although these situations are rare and few and far between, there are some amazing debuff builds you can make with this weapon that do perform absolutely beautifully. There are some interesting things that you could do with this weapon just to make it shake up the entire meta altogether, and the easiest one would literally just be change Plague of the Outcasts from being a debuff to an actual status effect. It will be absolutely surprising what you can actually do with this at that point. That is going to be rounding off part 1 of this little series, going over the exotics. There are quite a lot of them, and I don't want to put out too much of a lengthy video. We have covered the ARs and the LMGs. Up next will be the SMGs as well as the shotguns. In the meantime, have fun, good luck, don't die. It's bad for the health.